Without giving any answer to this offer, Kay stood still for some time. Perhaps if he opened the door of the next room, or even the front door, the two of them would not dare to stand in his way. Perhaps that would be the simplest way to settle the whole thing, by bringing it to a head. But maybe they would grab him, and if he were thrown down on the ground, he would lose all the advantage he, in a certain respect, had over them. So he decided on the more certain solution, the way things would go in the natural course of events, and went back in his room without another word either from him or from the policeman. He threw himself down on his bed, and from the dressing table he took the nice apple that he had put there the previous evening for his breakfast. Now it was all the breakfast he had, and anyway, as he confirmed as he took his first big bite of it, it was far better than a breakfast than he could have had through the goodwill of the policeman from the dirty cafe. He felt well and confident. He had failed to go into work at the bank this morning, but that could easily be excused because of the relatively high position he held there. Should he really send in his explanation? He wondered about it. If nobody believed him, and in this case that would be understandable, he could bring Mrs. Grubach in as a witness, or even the old pair from across the street, who probably even now were on their way over to the window opposite. It puzzled Kay, at least it puzzled him looking at it from the policeman's point of view, that they had made him go into the room and left him alone there, where he had 10 different ways of killing himself. At the same time, though, he asked himself, this time looking at it from his own point of view, what reason he could have to do so. Because those two were sitting there in the next room and had taken his breakfast, perhaps? It would have been so pointless to kill himself that, even if he had wanted to, the pointlessness would have made him unable. Maybe, if the policemen had not been so obviously limited in their mental abilities, it could have been supposed that they had come to the same conclusion and saw no danger in leaving him alone because of it. They could watch now if they wanted, and see how he went over to the cupboard in the wall, where he kept a bottle of good schnapps, how he first emptied a glass of it in place of his breakfast, and how he then took a second glassful in order to give himself courage, the last one just as a precaution for the unlikely chance it would be needed. Then he was so startled by a shout to him from the other room that he struck his teeth against the glass. "The supervisor wants to see you," the voice said. It was only the shout that startled him, this curt, abrupt, military shout that he would not have expected from the policeman called Franz. In itself, he found the order very welcome. "At last!" he called back, locked the cupboard, and without delay hurried into the next room. The two policemen were standing there and chased him back into his bedroom, as if that were a matter of course. "What do you think you're doing?" they cried. "Think you're going to see the supervisor dressed in just your shirt, do you? He'd see to it you got a right thumping, and us and all." "Let go of me, for Christ's sake," said Kay, who had already been pushed back as far as his wardrobe. "If you accost me when I'm still in bed, you can't expect to find me in my evening dress." "That won't help you," said the policeman, who always became very quiet, almost sad, when Kay began to shout, and in that way confused him, or, to some extent, brought him to his senses. "Ridiculous formalities," he grumbled, as he lifted his coat from the chair and kept it in both his hands for a little while, as if holding it out for the policeman's inspection. They shook their heads. "It's got to be a black coat," they said. At that, Kay threw the coat to the floor, and said, without knowing even himself what he meant by it, "Well, it's not going to be the main trial, after all." The policeman laughed, but continued to insist, "It's got to be a black coat." "Well, that's all right by me if it makes things go any faster," said Kay. He opened the wardrobe himself, spent a long time searching through all the clothes, and chose his best black suit, which had a short jacket that had greatly surprised those who knew him. Then he also pulled out a fresh shirt and began carefully to get dressed. He secretly told himself that he had succeeded in speeding things up by letting the policeman forget to make him have a bath. He watched them to see if they might remember after all, but of course it never occurred to them, although Willem did not forget to send Franz up to the supervisor with a message saying Kay was getting dressed. Once he was properly dressed, Kay had to pass by Willem as he went through the next room into the one beyond, the door of which was already wide open. Kay knew very well that this room had recently been let to a typist called Miss Burstner. She was in the habit of going out to work very early and coming back home very late, and Kay had never exchanged more than a few words of greeting with her. Now her bedside table had been pulled into the middle of the room to be used as a desk for these proceedings, and the supervisor sat behind it. He had his legs crossed and had thrown one arm over the backrest of the chair. In one corner of the room there were 3 young people looking at the photographs belonging to Miss Burstner that had been put into a piece of fabric on the wall. Hung up on the handle of the open window was a white blouse. At the window across the street there was the old pair again, although now their number had increased, as behind them, and far taller than they were, stood a man with an open shirt that showed his chest and a reddish goatee beard, which he squeezed and twisted with his fingers. "Joseph K?" asked the supervisor, perhaps merely to attract Kay's attention as he looked round the room. Kay nodded. "I dare say you were quite surprised by all that's been taking place this morning," said the supervisor, as with both hands he pushed away the few items on the bedside table, the candle and box of matches, a book and a pin-cushion which lay there as if they were things he would need for his own business. "Certainly," said Kay, and he began to feel relaxed now, that at last he stood in front of someone with some sense, someone with whom he would be able to talk about his situation. "Certainly I'm surprised, but I'm not in any way very surprised." "You're not very surprised?" asked the supervisor, as he positioned the candle in the middle of the table, and the other things in a group around it. "Perhaps you, don't quite understand me," Kay hurriedly pointed out. "What I mean is—" Here Kay broke off what he was saying and looked round for somewhere to sit. "I may sit down, mayn't I?" he asked. "That's not usual," the supervisor answered. What I mean is," said Kay without delaying a second time, "that, yes, I am very surprised, but when you've been in the world for 30 years already, and had to make your own way through everything yourself, which has been my lot, then you become hardened to surprises and don't take them too hard, especially not what's happened today." "Why especially not what's happened today?" "No, I wouldn't want to say that I see all of this as a joke. You seem to have gone to too much trouble making all these arrangements for that. Everyone in the house must be taking part in it as well as all of you. That would be going beyond what could be a joke, so I don't want to say that this is a joke." "Quite right," said the supervisor, looking to see how many matches were left in the box. "But on the other hand," Kay went on, looking round at everyone there and even wishing he could get the attention of the 3 who were looking at the photographs, "on the other hand, this really can't be all that important. That follows from the fact that I've been indicted, but can't think of the slightest offense for which I could be indicted. But even that is all beside the point. The main question is, who is issuing the indictment? What office is conducting this affair? I mean, are you officials? None of you is wearing a uniform, unless what you are wearing," here he turned towards Franz, "is meant to be a uniform. It's actually more of a traveling suit. I require a clear answer to all these questions, and I'm quite sure that once things have been made clear, we can take our leave of each other on the best of terms." The supervisor slammed the box of matches down on the table. "You're making a big mistake," he said. "These gentlemen and I have got nothing to do with your business. In fact, we know almost nothing about you. We could be wearing uniforms as proper and exact as you like, and your situation wouldn't be any the worse for it. As to whether you're on a charge, I can't give you any sort of clear answer to that. I don't even know whether you are or not. You're under arrest. You're quite right about that, but I don't know any more than that. Maybe these officers have been chit-chatting with you. Well, if they have, that's all it is. Chit-chat. I can't give you an answer to your questions, but I can give you a bit of advice. You better think less about us and what's going to happen to you and think a bit more about yourself. Stop making all this fuss about your sense of innocence. You don't make such a bad impression, but with all this fuss, you're damaging it. And you ought to do a bit less talking, too. Almost everything you've said so far has been things we could have taken from your behavior, even if you'd said no more than a few words, and what you have said has not exactly been in your favor."